A warm welcome to each of you. So wonderful to see all of your faces here today and to be practicing together. Such a joy. And folks here in person as well. So wonderful gathering. So as usual, for the Sunday morning program, we're going to go ahead and offer about a 10-minute guided meditation. And then I will offer a short Dharma talk, maybe half an hour or so, and then allow some time for questions and reflections at that point. And then we'll close with a sharing of the blessings. So announcements, I just want to say a couple of things. So one is that the registration for the retreat in Atlanta, Georgia, in the USA is open. And that retreat is August 16th to the 18th. And it's on the topic of building momentum in your practice. And I believe that there is also a hybrid option, so that's both in person and available online. So if you're interested in that, you might check it out. The link is on the website, Dassanaya.org website. We'll put that in the chat later on. And also, I announced a series of Buddhist art workshops. So the first one is a virtual tour of the British Museum, the Buddhist art collection at the British Museum. And that'll be happening in November, on November 24th. So you can also have a look at the website for that. And the registration's not quite open for that one yet, but coming soon. And of course, October 5th is our autumn gathering. So that's, again, both a hybrid. It's both in person and online. And it's really an opportunity for the whole community to come together and celebrate our practice together and another year. So I'll say more about that on the day of, but it's a time when usually we celebrate also Dassanaya having its birthday, the community having its birthday, so to speak. And it's also my 60th birthday this year. So we're going to have a big, hopefully, celebration. All right, so those are the announcements for today. And with that, we will go ahead and settle into our meditation practice for this morning, or this afternoon, or this evening, no matter where you are in the world. So I like to begin with just a bit of movement of the body. Maybe moving the head and the torso. Releasing tension. And allowing the body to come into a balanced, upright position. To leave plenty of room for the breath to breathe the body naturally. Relaxing the belly and really allowing the body to settle here in this place, in this time. No reason to hold on. And becoming aware of the sensations of hearing. No need to strain at all. Just allowing the attention to rest on whatever sensations of hearing are arriving in awareness. Staying curious about sensations of hearing, and perhaps noticing the beginning, the presence, and the end of particular sounds. Doesn't really matter whether the sounds are inner or outer. Just allowing the attention to rest on those sensations, and noticing how they shift from moment to moment. That brings us to the end of our meditation for this morning, this program. And I will begin with homage to the Buddha, as usual. And if you are familiar with it, you're welcome to chant along with your mic muted. So if you haven't already muted your mic, please do that now. And if it's unfamiliar, you can just let it wash over you. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Buddhang dhammang sanghang namasami. The early Buddhist teachings are very much imbued with a sense of physicality, with a sense of the practice as fully embodied. And I've been focused on that for a while. I just recently offered a retreat on that topic, and have been really thinking about all of the different facets of embodied practice that we see across different traditions within Buddhism, as well as just the everyday experience of it. And if we think about this in the context of the Buddha himself, the Indian man 2,500 plus years ago, who sat down under a tree and relieved all suffering, came to a place of absolute peace. And we think about the fact that he very intentionally set aside most of the big philosophical questions of his time in order to turn back to a direct experience of body and mind. Then it makes sense, right? If we think about it in that context, it makes sense that the instructions we're given time and time again are to come back to this body. Now, mind you, there's no coming back because you were never anyplace else, right? It's a matter of the attention and the way that we relate to the experience of mind or body. And so what happens is, what I want to suggest is that you really think about this in terms of your practice of everyday life. So last week I spoke a little bit about finding what foot you put in your clothes in the morning, right? A mindfulness of body practice. And it's okay if you miss that talk. It's really just a pointer at the ways that we can bring some intention to the mindfulness of body. And I want to suggest that when we do that, when we allow the experience of body to be as important or more important even than our ideas about experience of body or our ideas about what's going on with our life, then there's a certain simplicity that arises. And for that reason, the stories are of people who went off to the forest to practice or went to some quiet place to really enjoy that simplicity, right? But actually, if we think about the way that these bodies and minds work, you could say that the simplicity is really innate. The amount of experiences that you're having are here and they're happening in a sequence. And they may be more intense or less intense. But that process is one that can be discovered in any situation. I hadn't planned to talk about it, but it reminds me of, there's a story about a monk in Japan, in China, I guess it was. In China, because it was before Dogen came back from China, who had been practicing for quite a long time with a teacher that he really, really respected. And, a long time, 20 some years. And he got really fed up. He said, I'm not going to get it. I can see that I'm not going to get it. And he got quite discouraged. And so he leaves the monastery. He leaves the monastery in the middle of the night because he's too embarrassed to go talk to his teacher and say that he's discouraged and he doesn't want to keep going. And so the monastery is at the top of a mountain. That's typical in China. That's one of the ways, again, that people would kind of look for some simplicity by moving out of the city and going to the top of a mountain. So he's making his way down the mountain at night in the dark, right? And he trips and he stubs his toe and he actually tears off his toenail. Painful, so painful. And he goes, the pain. And then he remembers a teaching from his teacher about pain and the body and what does that mean. And it said that he woke up. He woke up from that experience. He realized an absolutely profound insight such that it changed his whole understanding of body and mind. And so what happened? He went back up to the monastery rather than leaving, because now he could actually understand. Now he could actually relate to what his teacher had been saying all along. So even in difficult circumstances, even in very painful circumstances, we can find that simplicity and unlock some insight through this embodied practice. But the physicality, we have to really let that physicality be at the forefront. Now, and so I was, as I was saying, I was on retreat recently and I was sharing this teaching about when that happens, when the simplicity of the embodied experience can come to the forefront, then you might also find that it suddenly becomes less self-referential. There's less of a sense of getting tangled up in the thing and the story being all about me. So the example is you're hearing a bird. And this has happened to me in meditation many times. You're hearing a bird, right? You have your eyes closed and you're sitting there and you hear the song of the bird. And at one point, I might have said, oh, yes, the bird singing a beautiful song for me. It's a beautiful morning. What a lovely bird. But no, right? The bird's not singing a song for me. The bird is just being bird. The bird is just doing what birds do. Even if I were looking right at it, even if it were looking right at me, the bird is doing what birds do. And when I experience the bird as doing what birds do, when I experience the bird as sound and as color and as movement and as light and as life, right? This, its own liveliness. Then there's going to be less, you could say, less entanglement there, right? Because it is as it is, and I can accept it as it is. When it's here, it's here. When it's gone, it's gone. And I can be completely intimate in that experience without it defining me in any way. So the storyline isn't about, there isn't a storyline. It's just that wonderful, miraculous, moment by moment, lived experience. It is just this body and mind as an instrument of experience. And there's an ease in that and a flow in that. And that flow, that momentariness of experience also has its own meaning. It has its own meaning. So we don't need to add another meaning onto it, this meaning that is about me, so to speak. So I want to tell you a little story that exemplifies this and that speaks to actually how powerful this practice can be, because I think that it's not necessarily intuitive, but it's a very good story actually. And it's from the so-called minor discourses, the Khuddaka Nikaya, and Udana, usually translated as like inspired utterances, inspired verses or words from the Buddha. And it's a story of an encounter that he had. And so this is Udana 110, for anybody who's interested in looking that up. And so it's a story about this man named Bahia. And Bahia was a spiritual seeker. He was an ascetic, you could say. He had also gone to look for the simplicity of life. Interestingly, so the sutta only tells us a couple of details about Bahia's life and practice. It says, one, he was of the bark cloth, which meant that he didn't wear actual like clothes made of fabric, which was considered to be quite luxurious at that time, and expensive. He wore actual like bark from trees. So he was really doing this very, very ascetic style of practice. Still more clothes than the Jains, right? So the Jains are said to be sky-clad. They wear nothing. They go around naked all the time for like completely renouncing clothes altogether, any type of covering. But anyway, so Bahya wasn't one of the Jains. He was a practitioner of the doing this practice of the bark cloth, and he lived close to the ocean, it said, actually. And he was very respected practitioner. People would support him with donations and such. All of this is in the sutta. Excuse me. But the interesting thing is that Bahya, at one point in his meditation, says to himself, oh, you know, I think I'm on the cusp of waking up. I'm on the cusp of enlightenment. And have I told you all this story recently? So folks in the retreat have heard this recently, but no, okay, good. So he thinks to himself, oh, you know, I'm on the right path and I'm just about there to full enlightenment. And then what happens is, according to the sutta, a deceased relative comes and visits him. So you might think of this as being like a ghost story. This deceased relative who's gone to a happy place, one of the heavenly realms, apparently. And so that deceased relative comes and visits Bahya and says, hey, dude, you know what? You're not on the path to full enlightenment. I'm sorry, but you're mistaken about that. It says, with an intention to help him, it says in the sutta. A former relative comes with an intention to give him some information that might be helpful. So Bahya has a conversation with his ghost relative friend and says, well, who do you think is actually? And this person, this being says, the Buddha. And the Buddha is saying it's Savatthi, so you should go see him. So sure enough, Bahya gets up off of his meditation seat and makes his way to Savatthi, which is several days' walk. And it's said he went there in a hurry because he really wants to wake up. He's very motivated. The one attribute about Bahya that strongly comes across here is that Bahya is a very motivated practitioner. And so he gets there to the Jeta Grove, and the Buddha is in town collecting his alms. He's collecting his meal for the day. So that means he would be with his robes across both shoulders, and he would be carrying his bowl, and people would put food into his bowl. And so it's in essence also a time when the Buddha is meeting people face to face. He's having these face-to-face encounters where people can give him the gift of food. So Bahya shows up, and he says, he walks right up to the Buddha, and he says, I hear you, the Buddha, please give me a teaching right now. And the Buddha says, Bahya, this is not the time. This is not the time. I'm in the middle of the alms round. I'm right here. I'm meeting with the families, he says. This is not the time. And then Bahya says, but you never know when you're going to die or when I'm going to die. So please give me a teaching right now. And now this would resonate with the Buddha, this idea that you never know, that you might die in any moment. In fact, that was also one of the Buddha's teachings. But the Buddha nonetheless says to Bahya again, no, Bahya, it's not the right time. No. And so Bahya says again, but no, but really, we never know when we might die, and I really would benefit from your teaching. So please give me a teaching. So the Buddha says, okay, Bahya, here's the teaching. And he gives him a very short one, right? A very short, pithy, insightful teaching. He says, you should train yourself in this way. In the seen, there will be only the seen. In the heard, there will be only the heard. In the thought, there will be only the thought. In the knowing, there will be only the knowing. And when you train thus, there will be no you within that, and no you outside of that, and no in between here or there. Just this is the end of suffering. Just this is the end of suffering. So he's asking Bahya very directly. He's exhorting Bahya to let lived experience be as it is. To study that and know that in a way, you could say, my master used to say, just be the thing itself. Know that you are the thing itself. And then when that happens, then there is nothing that comes between you and reality, knowing the truth of your life. There is the lived experience in all its glory, in all its fullness, without any confusion, without any resistance to that, without any attempt to make it fit some other box. Because that is true freedom. It is the freedom of this moment of being. To be able to fully experience this moment of being and find your equanimity with that, find your peace with that. That is the liberation from suffering. Because suffering comes from wanting it to be some other way, wanting it to be more permanent, wanting it to be about me, wanting it to be more pleasant or less unpleasant or here or there or some other place. So what happened to Bahya was that he woke up. So he obviously was doing something right, despite what his relatives had to say about it. He was in that place of being able to deeply receive this pointing at the simplicity and the clarity that is already here, if we're willing to be it, to know it. And then he died. He died that same day, actually. He was attacked by a cow. He must have it says that he was attacked by a cow with a calf. So he must have gotten too close to some cow's calf and she got upset with him and she trampled him or something. We don't know exactly the details, but it said that he did die that same day. And that when the Buddha heard about that, he instructed the monks to find Bahya's body and bury him as if he had been a monk, because he fully embodied the teaching. before he died. So as I have said many times, it's difficult for us to know where we are on the arc of our practice. We may be mistaken that we're closer or further away or somewhat hopeless. You might have heard those themes in today's talk, right? All of those ideas about it come to mind. And I would say it's quite difficult for us to discern because our idea of what awakening is not what awakening is, right? It's not that there's anything wrong with ideas. We need concepts. We practice to some extent by hearing, right? Hearing concepts and then relating them to our lived experience. Okay, does it really work like that or does it not? Right? That's part of our investigation. So it's not that the concepts are the problem, but our ideas about the arc of the path and how that's unfolding for us is not the same as when those conditions, when those momentary conditions come together in such a way that we're ready to receive that. We're ready to allow our confusion to drop away. And we're ready to actually live this life. Let life teach us what it has to teach us. So we may be learning that a little bit at a time, and that's also part of the process. It is definitely a gradual process, right? We start to examine what's happening here. We learn a little bit about how it works, what the content is, what are the stories we tend to tell ourselves. We learn a little bit about how the mind and body are interrelated, about our choices and ways that we can become more clear, more intimate with our experience. All of those things happen. But then there is a moment. So when people ask, is enlightenment gradual or sudden? I always have to say both, because there comes a moment of seeing, you can say of knowing rather than seeing, because the observer is also gone at that point, but of knowing the completeness of each moment of experience. And so when we talk about there's no you there, it doesn't mean that there isn't a body or that there isn't a mind or some life that's happening. What it means is that this thing is interdependent. It is a completely interactive instrument. It could not possibly be separate, even though that's what we often think, right? We think, I am this thing moving through the world. When the truth of the practice is, if you really study your lived experience of body and mind, what you find is that this thing is being moved by the world. All the time. All the time. And you have choice, and you also move. But those two things are always interdependent. Those two things are always the way we're built, right? This very expression of life. So Allow your body to be the instrument. Allow yourself to become aware of this body as the instrument of reality. And find your freedom right here in this moment, no matter what it is. Because as I often say, you might go to the mountaintop, or you might go to the ocean side, or you might go on retreat, or you might go see a person or this or that. But the promise of the practice is that you don't need to receive anything from me or anyone else. Bahya received the teaching, but the teaching was turning himself back to this thing, right? When you put your trust in the Dhamma puts it back to you. So as the Buddha also said to another being, a non-human being, he said, in this fathom-long body, in this roughly 6-foot-long body, there is the full capacity to awaken. Not somewhere else, not somebody else. This body, this mind, this seeing and hearing and thinking and knowing. So I always find it interesting when people say, well, you know, what's the everyday application of this practice? And I think to myself, what part of this wasn't every day for you, right? Like it's all there. It couldn't be any more every day. It is right here. Right? So when you hear the bird, just hear the bird. Just hear it. And don't worry where you are on the arc of practice, on the path. That worry isn't helping you at all. Right? Those judgments that you make about where you are on the path, that isn't actually particularly helpful, right? Because whether you're right or wrong, the time will come. But only if you're there, only if you put yourself in that practice. So just to close, the intimacy of this life, of this mind, with this body, with this world that you live in, is never far away. And that it's obscured, perhaps. It gets confused by our wanting it to be different. So when you find that wanting, that's a hint, that's a clue, that's a place for you to really look deeply and just know it. Again, there is no condition which cannot be used as a condition for waking up. Just like our friend who got discouraged and sent himself down the mountain. Even that was a condition for his awakening. All right, that's what I wanted to share today. And I hope that that's encouraging. It's always my intention to be encouraging. So, and as I have mentioned to you a couple of times now, we are going ahead and recording the question and answer and the reflections now. It didn't go up on YouTube last week. I think maybe that was just a trial run in case there was anybody who was concerned. So, but in the future, we'll go ahead and post the whole program. Unless, again, we hear from you that there's something that you have a concern about. And I mean that when I'm always happy to take care of keeping private things private if there's something that you have a concern about. But generally speaking, I think most people feel comfortable asking a question or offering a reflection. So we have a few minutes left for that, and everyone's welcome. Yes, Kylie. Hi.
Hi, good morning.
Good morning.
And yeah, thank you for, it was nice to be moved by that particular Dhamma this morning. Nice to have it flowing through. And I wanted to add a reflection from my own personal experience. When you mentioned even when times are difficult, even when you lose your toenail running down the mountain away, in my experience, I find it's like, especially when times are difficult, that I have kind of the more important insights for my practice. So I wanted to just add that small chunk to it. And also to say, I love that Bahia story, and it was really different this time.
Yes. Isn't
Yeah.
it funny how it sounds different each time? But
Totally.
yeah.
Anyway, thank you.
Thank you for that reflection, Kylie. Yes. Definitely. The hard times, they can be very instructive. Right? In fact, that was one of the Buddha's first teachings, was that we need to understand suffering. We need to turn our attention to understand suffering if we're going to understand the causes of suffering and the cessation of suffering. So yeah, so when that's happening, when we feel like we're suffering in some way, that's a good chance, right? To have a look. Yes, Beth.
So I'd been already thinking about like the difference between and how we know the difference between thinking and like intuition, and yeah, thought and feeling and experience. And applying this teaching to that, would we end up saying that it doesn't matter so much, and the thing to do would just to be with what is currently unfolding and be less. Is that making any sense? um with
Yes.
Yeah.
So it's a good question, Beth, and I would say it is definitely true that thought is not a problem in and of itself. Thinking is not a problem in and of itself. Even in meditation, I want to be very clear about that, folks. I can promise you personally that thinking in meditation is not a problem, and that it does not obstruct you from deeper states that are free of thought. Those things will arise given the particular conditions for persisting with an object, so to speak. But I don't want to get into the technical side. What I do want to say is the issue is, for us, is the presence, right? Is whether we are swept away completely by this being in some kind of fantasy of thought about the past, about the future, about whatever. Or are we actually present with the experience of the thought in the moment, right? And that is a huge distinction, right? And we know it, we see it. And this is, again, part of what we're learning in meditation. You can see it, right? There's a difference between I'm thinking right now about lunch and I'm really hungry and I'm wondering about lunch and I'm aware of thinking about lunch, and being so caught up in my fantasy of what lunch might be, right? That I completely lose touch of what's going on in this body or what room I'm in or whatever, right? I might as well be just asleep. So that is something for us to be careful about, because that's swept away by thought, right? That in early Buddhist terms, we would say that's a lack of mindfulness, right? It's a lack of actually receiving the experience in a way that we can actually discern its true qualities, right? We're just kind of bobbing along, so to speak. And the bobbing along also, again, isn't harmful, but it's just, it's I would say near impossible to actually have an insight into the workings of mind and body when you are swept away in that fashion, right? Because you need to have a great degree, and this is where people, I think, get concerned or feel maybe like it's something that's beyond their reach, is the degree of precision that's needed for insight, right? We need to have a fair ability to focus with clarity on our experience if we're going to unlock the process of how it works. And that, again, is a skill. It is not anything that is beyond the reach of anyone. It is a skill that is developed most of the time. Some people have kind of a natural ability, like people have natural athletic ability. Some people have natural concentration ability. But generally speaking, for most folks, it's something that we train in, so to speak, or we learn over time. So I hope that's helpful and it responds to your question there. No.
Well, it was good, and it definitely, but I think my question is when the moment is a moment of intuition as opposed to like the thinking mind, to know something, or you know, how to know the difference between those two. But then as I was thinking about with this, that it wouldn't be a matter of sorting out, you know, if it's your intuition or just thought that's happening, but that it's just the better thing to do isn't to then start another train of thought thinking about those things, but to then just be present with what is happening.
Is intuition not thought?
Oh, see, there you go. Yeah.
I mean, I'm just saying
Oh.
that because I'm just wondering how you're using the word, because
Yeah.
I think about it in terms of like the 5 aggregates, right? So you have the form body, and then you have contact, which spins off these different kinds of mental experience of that form body, or of the mind itself, the mental experience itself, right? So any kind of thought, it can be slice and dice in various ways, but it's still, you could think of it as being like sensations of the mind, in the same way that when you have a smell is a sensation for the sense organ of the nose.
Mm.
Thoughts are just sensations for the sense organ of the mind. No matter what kind of thought, whether they are, you know, like an analytical thought, or you know, some kind of thought of knowing the body, or some kind of thought of, you know, again, a wish, a fantasy, any old kind of thought.
The penny dropped that time. Thank you.
I got it. Okay, great. Thank you. Great. Okay. So we are past our time by a few minutes, but I think, what do you think, Dana? Do you want to go ahead and make the announcement?
Yes, I'll be quick. The practice of giving and receiving has been a part of Buddhism since its inception. Giving to Dassanaya Buddhist Community supports our guiding teacher, Dhammadipa, the physical location at the vihara, and allows us to continue to offer Buddhist teachings in support of the awakening of all beings. Visit our donate and giving pages on the website to offer financial, material, or volunteer supports. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Beautiful. Yes, much gratitude for everyone, all of our Sangha. Much gratitude for each of you, and the way that you offer supports and presence in all sorts of ways. And so just to share the merits of our practice today, dedicating the merits of our practice today to the full awakening of all beings, known and unknown, seen and unseen. May all beings realize absolute freedom and peace. By the power of the Buddha, the Dhamma, and the Sangha, may all beings be liberated.